a response. Which is better? Which sounds better? So my child would come to me, or I would meet someone. No, we're talking about your child, that someone you know, and they would say, well, you know, I'm through with it all. I'm just gonna take a bunch of pills and be done with it. And I would say, oh, Lottie, that's such a ridiculous thing to say. Or what would be better than to say, B, it sounds like you're in a lot of pain. And you can't see your way out. Now, I'm not trying to make you a therapist, but responding with empathy that as opposed to responding with problem solving. Most of us are problem solvers. If I come to you and I say, well, you know, I had a really rough week this week, and I'm talking to Sister Ragland, and she says, well, you know, did you do the 8 natural health laws? Did you drink your water? Did you go to sleep? Which sounds better. And if I say you don't mean that, I'm really discounting. The person has come to me with trust, and I'm saying to them, oh, you don't really mean that, and then I just go about my business. It would be better to say, sounds like things are really hard for you right now. Tell me what's been going on, or you could put it in your own words. I can't believe that I'm hearing you say that. Sister Cheryl, you're such a strong person and your faith is so strong. I'm telling you, I'm disappointed in you, Cheryl. That's what I'm telling you. But you're coming to me to share your innermost thoughts, and you need my respect. It would be better if I said, you must really, really be hurting inside to consider ending your life. Things must be really. What you really want to do is provide a safe space, a safe ear for the person to get it off their chest. So when we begin to problem solve and give that hardcore, you're not studying your Bible enough. You need to read 5 chapters of Psalms every day, whatever. And a lot of times when a person is in a crisis like that, they may be Christians, but they're so overwhelmed with the crisis. They can't see, remember the forest for the trees. You have a great life. Why would you end it? You live in a big, beautiful house. You drive a Mercedes. You got a good job. What would be better? Maybe you're wondering how your life got so complicated and difficult. Remember, you're providing a safe place for them to share. I actually don't believe, well, I know I wouldn't go and share my innermost thoughts with Pastor Herbert, Sister Lottie, Sister Luna, if I thought that they didn't respect me and they were trying to live a Christian life, because I want feedback from someone who has a level head, right? So if I approach them and they immediately start cutting me down, you should do this, you should do that, then I'm gonna back away and I'm gonna clamp up. So I haven't helped myself. So you want to get professional help if the person can't work through that, or you don't feel safe and they can't promise you that they're not going to, they don't have a plan. It's okay to ask them, do they have a plan? This made me remember, I had really forgotten when I lived in Huntsville, I had a part-time job with the University of Alabama in Huntsville. They had a paramedic EMT program, and I was a clinical director for their psychiatric rotation. So basically my job was to educate them that it was okay to ask the person whether they were suicidal. Because you get a call and the person is They say they're having chest pain and they vomited, and you go in and they have a list of questions that they have to ask. And one of those questions is suicide. And it's difficult until you get used to it, that this is part of the whole person. Sometimes people can be so physically depressed, even children, that they don't complain about the physical part, but the emotional part, and they want to escape from whatever they're experiencing. And in a child's mind, or even in an adult's mind, that is the only option. They just don't see any other way. They don't want to put up with it anymore. So that was my job, to educate them that it was okay, and why it was okay to ask the questions. Do you ever have suicidal thoughts? Are you depressed? Under what circumstances? So forth and so on. So of course you would want to remove anything in an environment, if you're in the home, that would be used to kill themselves, like lethal weapons or substances. So one of the key things that parents can do is to teach and show your child how to cope with life. You practice good problem-solving skills yourself and be consistent. But if your child see you in a crisis, say, for example, you're getting ready to go shopping and you're on the road and you all of a sudden you have a flat tire. Well, if the child hears you rattle off some superlative words because you've had a flat tire, they're taking that in. This is how you respond when you have a flat tire. Or they can see you calmly say, I'm going to get on the phone and I'm going to call your dad, or I'm going to call a wrecker, and everything is going to be okay. Children learn, and we as human beings, we learn more by what we see, and we pattern ourselves more practical stuff than what people say. You want to check in with your child, or if you have a roommate, and ask them how their day went, if they're not sharing that. And one way to do that is if you develop that relationship from the very beginning. You can't wait until a child is 15 years old and they think that you're invading their privacy. Why is she asking me about what happened in school today? She ain't been asking me. That communication. Now, the one article that I got this list from said, encourage exercise. But of course, the thought came into my mind, a good thought. Remind the child about the 8 health laws, the New Start. Are they really following through with drinking their water and getting exercise if you all aren't doing things together? And then along the way, I thought, Lord, give me an acronym. The reason why I say this is because the gentleman that wrote the book, Hope Always, the emergency room physician who turned minister and who has a ministry for suicide now, he said that he taught his kids a little acronym that whenever they felt unsafe, whenever they felt like they were in a crisis, whenever they felt like things were just going to go haywire, I won't share with you what the acronym was because my thoughts on health are regulated by the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. And the first letter in his acronym was H, for the child to check to see were they hungry. And I'm like, what does that have to do with the crisis? I said, it's gotta be, and I start thinking and I start praying and I said, okay, what do I do when I'm in a crisis or, things are getting tough? Well, I'm always trying to pray. And I thought about using the word stop. That's something easy because I'm really focusing this for the kids, but we adults can use it too. So over the course of the weeks, the Lord gave me an acronym and told me what it is. First, pray. If we're not connected, we need to be connected. A child can remember that. My mind was taken back to many years ago when I was 9 years old. I grew up in North Carolina. We used to have a lot of snow in the wintertime. Sometimes we would have to miss school, even though they had the tractors and they had a lot of good equipment. The snow would just be that bad that we would have to stay out of school. And so we had to make that day up on Saturday. Well, as Adventists, all my parents had to do was write a letter to the principal and say that we were Seventh-day Adventists and we didn't go to, work or school on Saturday. And they would give me homework and everything had been going fine. So I was probably, I'm thinking in the 4th grade. And I had an experience that I hadn't thought about in a very, very long time. But what happened is when we went to recess, and we would have a recess period, one of the 45 minutes or an hour in the day would be devoted for us to go outside. It was kind of like what they would, in high school, they would call PE. And each class had a section on the playground, and you couldn't mingle and go to section B. You had to stay in your little pod and play for that time period. Well, there were 3 girls, and I will never forget it. It was 3 girls, and I know I kept saying to myself, this is not fair because it's 3 against 1. I didn't realize I was being bullied. The first girl said to me, well, where were you yesterday? You didn't come to school. You're going to get retained because you didn't come to school, and blah, blah, blah. And she just kept on. And the others start taunting me. And next thing I know, they were pushing me. And I was really afraid because, like I said, the thought kept going on in my mind was that 3 against 1, this is not fair. I cannot tell you where I learned this or how I learned it, but I know it had to be in church. You know what I did. I called on the Lord. Lord, help me. The power of prayer. I had one cousin that was in the same grade that I was in. We were in a different class. And I don't know where he came from. I don't know how he got from where he was supposed to be to where I was. But by the time he and another cousin who was not at that school, so he had to be playing hooky that day. I don't know how it happened, but within a second, and by the time they got there, they said, what's going on? And the girls looked, because here go 2 boys, and they're bigger than all of us or whatever. And they started saying, they said, no, this is not going to happen. This is our cousin. This is not going to happen. And they just fled the scene. First, I prayed. And then I believed that God would help me, and he did. Well, in the pushing and shoving, one had hold to my sleeve and the other pushed me, and it ripped the sleeve off right where the stitching was. So the coat was not torn. I don't know what I said to my mother, but I know I didn't tell the truth because I was afraid. I don't know why I was afraid, because I hadn't done anything wrong. But that is the first thing that we need to do if we're not already connected to the light, is to pray. And then imagine angels surrounding you. Repeat God's promises. Stay connected in prayer and trust God's way. Now, you can use this at any time, and I would pray that the kids would learn how to use it. And then it came to me to pair up a verse in my thoughts with each section. So pray without ceasing was 1 Thessalonians 5:17. The angel of the Lord encampeth around about them that fear him and delivereth them, Psalms 34. Good text to memorize, to repeat. Trust in the Lord with repeat. This is repeat, R is repeat. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Repeat the promises of God. Find a promise, your child or you, find a promise that will help you. S, I am the vine, ye are the branches. Reminding you that we've got to stay connected. T, thy word is a lamp unto my feet. I heard someone say that this morning, and a light unto my path. There are more promises in the Bible than that. But you know, many years ago, when I read this quote from Great Controversy, I thought about that day that I was bullied by 3 girls. And when I read this, it said, worldly wisdom teaches us that prayer is not essential. Men of science claim that there can be no real answer to prayer, but there would be a violation, there would be a violation of law, a miracle, and that miracles have no existence. Well, God blessed me with a miracle that day because those girls would have beat me down, 3 against 1. Such teaching is opposed to the testimony of the scriptures. It is a part of God's plan to grant us an answer to the prayer of faith. That which he would not restore, did we not thus ask? We need to instill within our children the importance of staying connected. We're not with them. We cannot wait until they're 15 years old because the enemy is already in their minds with the bad thoughts. So this is the National U.S. Crisis Line 988, if you find yourself in such a situation. But I would implore you to today, if you don't already have a plan, if you don't already have a contact person or persons that you can feel safe to go to, that you can call at any time, then you need to prayerfully sit down and talk to the Lord and ask him to help you find that contact person that you could call at any time, day or night, and especially a child, because children usually don't have cars, they don't have that much money, and they need resources. That is one of the reasons why they will flee to suicide so quickly, because they have not learned that resilience. But let us remember that God is expecting us to do our part. Of course, we use the King James Version for all Bible texts. And I want to share something that I've never shared publicly. I do have a personal private interest in suicide, not something that I had really thought about, even when I start doing this first part. It was the year 2014. And if you would have asked me at that time, I would have said, this would never happen, not in my family. But I had a brother who was 75 years old. He was from my mother's first marriage, and he committed suicide. It was a shock to the family. But he was a military man. He was what do you call an officer? And they actually basically opened the door for officers to deal with their problems by going to the clubs. That's their way of de-stressing. And he'd been a workaholic all his life. He lived in New York, and he was just fascinated with New York and California. And he came down with cancer. He did not share it with the family. He was not really close to the family. And, but he decided in October to move back to hometown in North Carolina. And he called me one day to tell me that he was doing that. And he said he was moving home to die. And I was like, what are you talking about? because I never known him to be sick. But anyway, he said he had stomach cancer, and he dealt with stomach cancer for like a year. And he stayed there from October until the second week in December. He did not like the fact that he could not walk out on the curb and get a taxi. He did not like the fact that the deli wasn't downstairs, you know, how you could be living in an apartment upstairs. And he did not like the inconveniences of a little town. So he found his way back to New York. And 2 days later, he jumped from a building, the hotel that he was staying in. He never left a suicide note. So to this day, we don't know the real reason why. We can speculate that he did it because he did not want to suffer the pain or, you know, the progression of the disease process, et cetera. So how do you deal with something like that? How do you deal with something like that? How do you even deal with something like that when you know that a person has thoughts of suicide? You use these tools of observation and your communication skills, and no doubt, and not no doubt, but the skills of communication, the empathy, being non-judgmental are things that we can carry over and use with anyone who's in a distress situation. We can listen to them empathetically and share the love of God. You're gonna meet people who don't want to hear that about God, but remember, the whole thing is to create an environment where a person will feel safe, because number one, they really do want to live, bottom line. Otherwise, they would not tell you. So, and of course, if you're in a situation like that, whether it's a child or an adult, you're praying for God to lead and direct you. This is not the part where we're in a therapy session and the person is able to maintain. We're talking about being on the front line. And as I was saying earlier, our children are being bombarded. I know not just the patients that I've worked with, but I know many Adventist families who are dealing with this gender thing. Is really rampant in the teenage and the young adult lifestyle now. I knew a mother who shared on a prayer line that, but I still know her. She just happened to look at her daughter's Facebook, and she announced to the world that she was fluid. She never mentioned it to her or whatever, but I listened to the mother and I thought, well, you know, visually, my observation skills, I saw how the girl was dressing. So it was a question in my mind, you know, I didn't say anything, but there's a question in my mind. There are things that you can note, you can see and not see. So it's not just in the world that we're having these problems, but the more that I live and the things that I see, and especially with this suicide situation increasing among our young children, I see how the enemy is truly walking to and fro, seeking whom he may devour. And he is going to devour our children if we do not arm them with the tools that they need. And that is learning to connect with God and being obedient unto God. Thank you for your time and your attention, and I'll open the floor for any comments or questions.